I found my mother's love letters hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the attic. But they weren't for my father. My hands trembled as I held the small, dusty bundle tied together with a faded blue ribbon. The attic was silent, except for the sound of rain tapping gently against the roof tiles. It was a cold, gray afternoon in November. Exactly 10 years since my mother, Alina, had passed away. My father, David, was downstairs watching television, completely unaware that his daughter was about to uncover a secret that would change our understanding of our family forever. I had come up here to find an old winter coat. Instead, I found a mystery. I sat down on the dusty wooden floor, ignoring the cold draft that was blowing through the cracks in the walls. I stared at the envelope on top of the pile. The paper was yellow with age, and the handwriting was elegant and slanted, a style I did not recognize. It certainly wasn't my father's blocky, practical handwriting. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. A part of me knew I should stop. I should put the letters back, nail the floorboard down, and pretend I had never seen them. Privacy is a sacred thing, even after death. But curiosity is a powerful force, and in that moment, it was stronger than my conscience. I carefully untied the blue ribbon. It felt fragile, like it might disintegrate if I pulled too hard. I opened the first envelope and pulled out the letter. The date at the top was from 30 years ago, 2 years after my parents had married. I began to read. "My dearest Alina," it began. "I sat by the river today for 3 hours, waiting for you. I know you couldn't get away. I know David was home early. But the thought of not seeing your face, even for a moment, makes the world feel colorless. You are the light in my gray existence. Please tell me we can meet on Tuesday. I will wait forever if I have to. Forever yours, Thomas." Thomas. I whispered the name out loud, tasting the strangeness of it. Thomas. I didn't know a Thomas. My mother had never mentioned a Thomas. My father's name was David. My uncles were named Robert and James. Who was this man who wrote with such passion? And why did my mother, a woman who always seemed so composed and dutiful, keep these letters hidden under a floorboard? I felt a sudden wave of nausea. Was my entire childhood a lie? Was my mother, the woman who baked cookies on Sundays and helped me with my math homework, actually living a double life? I felt a mix of anger and confusion. I looked at the pile. There were at least 50 letters. This wasn't a brief mistake. This was a long-term relationship. I picked up another letter, dated 5 years later. I was 3 years old by then. "Elle, I saw you at the park today with your little girl. She looks just like you. I wanted to come over. I wanted to say hello, to touch your hand, to be a part of that picture. But I stayed in the shadows, just as we agreed. It kills me, Elle. It kills me to see you living a life that I cannot be a part of. But as long as you are happy, or at least safe, I will keep my distance. But do not ask me to stop loving you. That is the one thing I cannot do. Forever yours, Thomas. Tears pricked my eyes. This stranger, Thomas, had watched me play in the park. He had stood in the shadows, loving my mother from afar. The pain in his words was palpable. It wasn't just a sordid affair. It sounded like a tragedy. I couldn't stay in the attic anymore. The air felt too heavy, too thick with ghosts. I gathered the letters, shoved them into my large handbag, and hurried downstairs. "Emma, is that you?" My father's voice called out from the living room. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. I couldn't face him right now. I felt like I was carrying a bomb in my bag. "Yes, Dad. I couldn't find the coat. I'm going to run to the coffee shop for a bit. I need some fresh air." "All right, sweetheart," he replied, his voice sounding tired. "Drive safe. It's slippery out there." Guilt washed over me. My father was a good man. He was kind, reliable, and had cared for my mother through her long illness without a single complaint. He had washed her hair when she was too weak to lift her arms. He had read to her for hours when her eyesight failed. The idea that she might have loved someone else while he was doing all of that broke my heart. I drove to the Roasted Bean, a small cafe on the edge of town where I often went to think. I ordered a black coffee, found a secluded table in the corner, and took the letters out again. I needed to understand the timeline. I needed to make sense of this puzzle. I sorted them by date. The correspondence spanned 15 years. It started shortly after my parents' wedding and ended abruptly about a year before my mother got sick. As I read through them, a story began to unfold. It wasn't the story of a reckless affair. It was a story of two people who had met too late, or perhaps under the wrong circumstances. Thomas wrote about books they had discussed, about dreams my mother had shared with him, dreams of traveling to Italy, of painting, of writing poetry. These were things I never knew my mother cared about. To me, she was just Mom. She was the one who made sure the laundry was done and the bills were paid. But through Thomas's eyes, I saw a different woman. I saw an artist. I saw a dreamer. One letter, dated when I was 10, caught my attention. "I walked past the gallery today," Thomas wrote. "I saw that you didn't submit your painting. You told me last week that you were finally going to do it. Why, Elle? Are you afraid of your own talent? Or are you afraid that if you succeed, you might realize you want more than the life you have? David is a good man. I know this. You tell me constantly. But goodness isn't the same as passion. Don't let your soul wither away." I put the letter down and stared out the window. The rain was coming down harder now, blurring the streetlights. I remembered that time. I remembered Mom painting in the kitchen. She had painted a beautiful landscape of a storm over the ocean. It was dark and moody, very unlike her usual cheerful demeanor. One day, I came home from school, and the canvas was gone. When I asked her where it went, she just smiled sadly and said, "It wasn't very good, Emma. I threw it away." Now I knew that wasn't the whole truth. She hadn't thrown it away because it was bad. She threw it away because it represented a part of herself she was trying to suppress, the part that belonged to Thomas. I sipped my cold coffee. I felt a strange shift in my perspective. For the last 10 years, I had mourned the mother I knew. But now, I was grieving for the woman I never got to meet. The woman who wanted to paint storms and travel to Italy. I needed to know who he was. I had to find him. I looked through the envelopes again, searching for a return address. There was nothing. Just my mother's name scrawled on the front. However, in one of the later letters, Thomas mentioned a specific location. I will be at the old bookstore on 4th Street this Friday, at the poetry reading. I know you probably won't come, but I will save a seat for you in the back row, just in case. The old bookstore on 4th Street. It was called the Dust Jacket. It was still there. It was a local institution. I looked at the time. It was 4:00 p.m. The bookstore would be open. I packed the letters away and drove straight there. My heart was pounding in my chest. What was I doing? Was I looking for a ghost? And if I found him, what would I say? Hello, are you the man who loved my mother? It sounded insane. But I couldn't stop myself. The bookstore smelled of vanilla and old paper, a comforting scent that usually made me feel calm. Today, it made me feel anxious. I walked up to the counter. An elderly woman with silver glasses was reading a newspaper. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shaking slightly. She looked up, smiling. "Yes, dear. How can I help you?" I'm looking for someone. I know this is a long shot, but did you know a man named Thomas who used to come here? Maybe about 10 or 15 years ago. He might have attended poetry readings. The woman's expression changed. Her smile faded into a look of thoughtful recollection. "Thomas," she murmured. "We have had many Thomases over the years. Can you describe him?" "I can't," I admitted. "I've never seen him." But he was. He was a writer, I think, or a poet. He was friends with my mother, Eleanor. The woman's eyes widened behind her glasses. She took off her spectacles and placed them gently on the counter. "You are Eleanor's daughter." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yes, I'm Emma." The woman sighed. A long, deep sound that seemed to carry years of history. "I wondered if you would ever come. Your mother talked about you all the time. You knew them. You knew Thomas and my mother." "I did," she nodded. "I'm Mrs. Gable. I've owned this shop for 40 years. Thomas was my brother." My jaw dropped. "Your brother?" "Yes," she said softly. "Come, sit down." She gestured to 2 velvet armchairs in a quiet corner of the shop. I sat down, clutching my bag. Mrs. Gable sat opposite me, her hands folded in her lap. "Thomas passed away 4 years ago," she said gently. The news hit me harder than I expected. I had just discovered his existence, and now I had lost him again. "Oh," I managed to say. I'm so sorry. He was a quiet man, Mrs. Gable continued. He was a literature professor at the community college. He never married, he said. Well, he said he had already met the love of his life, and the timing just wasn't right. My mother, I whispered. Yes, Eleanor. Mrs. Gable looked at me with kind, sad eyes. I want you to know something, Emma, because I know what you must be thinking. You found letters, didn't you? I nodded, feeling my face flush. Your mother never betrayed your father in the way you might think, Mrs. Gable said firmly. She and Thomas, they were soulmates who met in a grocery store one rainy Tuesday. They talked. They connected on a level that most people never find. But your mother, she was a woman of immense honor. She told Thomas that she had made a vow to David, and that she had a beautiful little girl named Emma who needed a stable home. So nothing happened, I asked, confused. The letters seemed so intimate. They met for coffee. They wrote letters. They shared their inner worlds, Mrs. Gable explained. It was an emotional affair, yes, and that carries its own kind of guilt. But your mother never left your father. She never slept with Thomas. She chose her family. She chose you, Emma. Every single day. She made the choice to say goodbye to Thomas and go home to cook dinner for you and David. I felt tears streaming down my face. I had thought the letters were proof that my mother was unhappy, that she didn't love us. But hearing this, I realized the opposite was true. She loved us so much that she sacrificed her own passionate desires to keep our family together. She carried the weight of a broken heart in silence so that I could have a happy childhood. Thomas understood, Mrs. Gable continued. He respected her choice. That's why he stayed in the shadows. He loved her enough to let her be the wife and mother she wanted to be. But he wrote the letters because he needed somewhere to put all that love. He gave them to her, and she kept them. I suppose she needed to know she was adored. She kept them under the floorboard, I said, wiping my eyes. We all need a secret place, Mrs. Gable smiled sadly. A place where we can be the version of ourselves that life didn't allow us to be. I stayed with Mrs. Gable for another hour, listening to stories about Thomas. She told me he was kind, that he loved jazz music, and that he had read every book in this shop. She told me that he used to keep a photo of me and my mom in his wallet. A photo he had cut out of the local newspaper when I won a spelling bee in the 3rd grade. When I finally left the bookstore, the rain had stopped. The air was crisp and cold. I felt exhausted, but also strangely light. The heavy burden of the secret had transformed into something else, a complex, bittersweet understanding of human nature. I drove home slowly. The lights were on in the living room. My father would be wondering where I was. As I pulled into the driveway, a new fear gripped me. What about Dad? Did he know? And if he didn't, should I tell him? I walked into the house. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air. My father was in the kitchen, awkwardly trying to slice a loaf of bread. His hands were shaking a little, a symptom of his age that always made my chest tighten. "Hey, Dad," I said, putting my keys on the counter. "Emma, you're back," he beamed. "I thought I'd start dinner. I got a rotisserie chicken. Figured it would be easy." I looked at him. He was wearing his old, faded sweater. He looked so simple, so uncomplicated compared to the passionate, poetic Thomas. But as I looked closer, I saw the lines of worry on his forehead, the way his eyes lit up when he saw me. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling, "I need to talk to you about something." He stopped slicing the bread. He put the knife down and turned to face me. His expression shifted from cheerful to serious in an instant. It was as if he knew. "It's about the attic, isn't it?" he asked quietly. I froze. "What?" "You went up there to find your coat," he said, pulling out a chair and sitting down heavily. "But you found the box, the one under the floorboard." My mouth went dry. You knew." He let out a long sigh and rubbed his face with his hands. "I've known for 20 years, Emma." I stared at him, stunned. "You knew about Thomas, and you never said anything." "I wanted to," he admitted. "In the beginning, I was angry, furious. I found a letter she had left on her dresser by mistake. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick him out of town. Why didn't you?" "Because," he looked up at me, his eyes watery. "I watched her. I watched her come home every day. I watched her kiss you goodnight. I watched her sit beside me on the sofa and hold my hand. I realized that she was struggling. She was fighting a war inside herself. She was torn between a fantasy life with him and a real life with us." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I realized that if I forced her to choose, I might lose her," he said. "And I loved her too much to lose her. So, I made a choice too. I chose to be the husband who stayed. I chose to be the safe harbor. I knew I couldn't write poetry like he could. I couldn't offer her that breathless, romantic excitement. But I could offer her stability. I could offer her unconditional love. I could be the one who made her tea when she was sick." I walked over and sat next to him, taking his rough hand in mine. "Did she know you knew?" I asked. "We never spoke of it," he said. "It was the elephant in the room. But I think she knew that I knew. And I think she loved me for not asking her to explain. You see, Emma, love isn't always about being the only one. Sometimes people have big hearts. Sometimes they have room for different kinds of love. She loved him for the dream, but she loved me for the reality." He squeezed my hand. "And in the end, she stayed. She was with me until her last breath. That has to count for something, doesn't it?" "It counts for everything, Dad," I whispered, resting my head on his shoulder. I realized then that my father wasn't just the boring, responsible one. He was the bravest man I had ever met. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to love someone who is half in love with someone else. It takes a lack of ego that I couldn't even comprehend. He had swallowed his pride for the sake of his family. "What should I do with the letters?" I asked after a long silence. He looked at the bag on the table. Do you want to keep them? I don't think so, I said. They feel heavy. Then let's burn them, he suggested. Not out of anger, but to let them go. They belong to the past. They belong to Alina and Thomas. They don't need to be here anymore. We went into the backyard. The night was cold and the grass was wet. My father brought the metal fire pit out from the shed. We lit a small fire. One by one, I tossed the envelopes into the flames. I watched the elegant handwriting turn into ash. I watched the words, "Forever yours," curl up and disappear into the smoke. It was a solemn moment, but it wasn't sad. It felt like a release. We were releasing my mother from her secret. We were releasing Thomas. And we were releasing the fear that our family wasn't perfect. As the last letter burned, my father put his arm around me. She loved us, Emma, he said firmly. Never doubt that. I know, I said. And for the first time since finding the box, I truly believed it. Life, I realized, is not a romance novel. It's messy. It's complicated. People are capable of feeling contradictory things at the same time. My mother had carried a secret garden in her heart, but she had planted her roots with us. I looked up at the night sky. The clouds were clearing, revealing a few faint stars. I thought about Thomas, the man who waited in the shadows. I thought about my mother, painting storms she never showed anyone. And I thought about my father, the quiet hero who loved through the pain. I love you, Dad, I said, hugging him tight. I love you too, sweetheart, he replied. Now, let's go inside. The chicken is getting cold. We walked back into the warmth of the house, leaving the ashes and the secrets behind us in the dark. I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I hadn't found the fairy tale I thought I wanted, but I had found something better. I had found the truth. And the truth, although painful, was full of a deep, resilient, and imperfect love. That was enough for me.